Welcome everybody to WestGrid's final town hall of the year. We try to have a town hall every few months to bring everybody up to date on what we're doing. I'm Patrick Mann. I'm the WestGrid Director of Operations. And some of the standard admin things, you can ask questions, feel free during the session. It's probably a good idea if you turn off your microphone unless you've got a question. And you can also ask on the group chat there, and we'll try to answer it. Anything else there, Jan, I should mention? I think that's good. Yep.
No, I think that's great.
Yep. Good. Today we're going to start with Jay, who will talk about the new organization that's being set up by ICED. Then I'll do some of the usual WestGrid Compute Canada updates and operations. We're continuing to look at a commercial cloud. We talked about that a little bit, I think, in the last one. And then the user training from Alex, our training coordinator. And at that point, I think I'm going to hand it over to Jay Black. Jay has been a WestGrid board director for actually a couple of years now, I think, Jay. And and he was co-chair of the whole digital research infrastructure effort in a few years ago, which ended up with the recommendation to Cabinet for a really major amount of money, $500 million in the end that Cabinet came up with. We're in the middle now of figuring out how that's all going to work and what the new organization will look like. Jay, I'm just going to hand it over to you. I think I will stop sharing.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Now, just because this worked a few moments ago when Patrick and I tried it, doesn't mean it'll work now, right?
Exactly. Looks good.
Looks good.
Are we good to go?
We are good to go.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, so this is a very brief update, and I'm hoping to leave time for any questions that you have at the end. I've been involved in this file for, I think, more than 8 years in various guises, so it's really nice to see things actually starting to move. And in fact, later today, assuming we get through a whole bunch of mechanics and technical things, there'll be some new postings on the EngageDRI website that you should publicize and have a look at. So EngageDRI is .ca is the website that we're using to communicate with everybody across the country, and there's an email address, info@EngageDRI. There may be a couple of other email addresses being created shortly, but that's the one for now. Please don't hesitate to send queries, questions, and comments there, especially on any of the position papers and models that we're going to be putting out, and the actual activities over the next couple of months as things really start heating up. My intent this morning is not really to go over stuff that I've said before, for example, at the AGM, and there's lots of information on the EngageDRI website, so I'd encourage you to look at that. But maybe just to back up a little bit, this is from the ICED website, the ministry website, from them as opposed to from us. And the announcement that came out a year and a half ago, I guess it is now, accepted some recommendations from the Leadership Council Working Group. And one of the recommendations of the several alternatives that we submitted was this kind of an arrangement for moving forward in the future. Canary would concentrate more on the networking, more narrowly construed than it is now. In particular, both data management and research software would no longer be part of Canary's responsibilities, but would move into the new DRI organization. And of course, advanced research computing will move into the new organization as Compute Canada winds down over the next couple of years. Patrick was right that the overall announcement was essentially $500 million over 5 years. Some of that goes to Canary, and some of that goes to the ARC expansion that's underway even as we speak, leaving about 375, if my memory serves, to set up and run the new organization over the next 5 years. One of the important questions for all of you and for all of the people that may report to you as technical support for WestGrid or Compute Canada is, so what does this mean for me? And unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that today in any detailed sense, but NDRIO has committed, and I said the ministry is requiring that we have a very strong commitment to preserving and retaining all of the highly qualified personnel throughout this whole ecosystem. I know that there is some early planning underway inside Compute Canada. I am not privy to it, and I also don't believe there's been anything public said about that yet. The other thing that changed relative to the diagram that I showed a couple of moments ago is that on the one hand, the government is committed to maintaining essentially the 60-40 split that has historically been the case with CFI. That is that the federal government will fund 40% and the other 60% of the infrastructure has to be funded by a combination of provincial governments, institutions, and at least under CFI rules, conceivably matching funding from private organizations. That commitment overall remains in place, but the government is being quite a bit more flexible in two ways. First of all of the funding is moving out of CFI, so we will no longer be subject to that particular set of curious processes, let me say. Moving out, the funding's moving out of ISED. A second way in which it's changing is that the government is prepared to cover 100% of the costs of national infrastructure and national HQP. On the other hand, for regional and institutional infrastructure and HQP, they're only prepared to cover 25%, and those 100%, 25% have to balance out grosso modo across the country to be the 60-40 split that the government wants to see. But there will not be, as there has been in the past for CFI, a direct accounting for that at the level almost of boxes of pencils purchased with what money. So assuming that nothing changes in the government, I think we're going to be in a very much more congenial environment to work through the mechanics here. So what's been happening so far? NDRIO does actually exist. We haven't given it a formal name. It's a numbered corporation or numbered association. What we're calling the Applicant Board is in place. Those are the 4 people who agreed to put in all the paperwork to make 11593-765 Canada Association. They are not intended to be there in the long term. There are quite a few or a growing number of interim staff in place, an interim chief executive officer whose name is George Ross, an interim CFO whose name is Norm Reese, some administrators, some consultants like myself, and project manager, and so on and so forth. So we have money flowing from ISED to pay for that. So that was a major step, is that we do have what's called a contribution agreement. So that's the formal contract with the ministry that goes from essentially now or whenever it was signed back in November through March of 2021. So just over a year and a half. There will have to be a new contribution agreement agreed and signed for the rest of the other 3 years of this funding arrangement. We've been very busy over the course of the fall, consulting across the country with in-person and in virtually. We had 6 in-person consultations from Vancouver to Halifax. We had 3, 4, I forget now, virtual consultations. And an important commitment that we've made is for transparency with everyone. about what we're doing and why. So finally, the board and the interim staff have engaged an executive search firm, which is Outages Bernstein, to help us in getting an inaugural board and starting the CIO search, permanent CEO search. So to be clear, the applicant board has to be very careful about the extent to which it binds the future inaugural board, is the term we're using, which we hope to have in place by February. So the process, let me move on to what's in progress, is that we have finalized and posted on the website a governance model and a membership model, which will be refined and expanded, but by the inaugural board. Again, the applicant board doesn't want, which is basically a self-selected group of people, is very conscious of not overcommitting the incoming inaugural board. So in particular, the CEO search will not actually start until the inaugural board is in place. But all of the materials are being prepared by Outages on the perhaps optimistic assumption that the new board will approve the continued use of Outages to move forward. And that only makes sense. Later today, assuming we get all the mechanics done, we will post on the website details about how organizations can become members of the new organization. Basically, there will be 2 tiers of membership: voting members and non-voting associate members. The voting members are expected to be the institutions with research portfolio and income, if you will. The funding will be in a range from $5,000 to $15,000 per year, starting notionally April 1st, and at least for next year, any fees that institutions pay to Compute Canada will be deducted from the fees assessed to be a member of NDRIO. The associate members will be asked to pay a fixed fee of $500 a year. That can be the many organizations that are in the periphery of this ecosystem. Some of the professional organizations like the Association of Research Libraries. It may be disciplinary groups like the astronomy groups. It may be, and likely should be, groups like WestGrid as a corporation. It may also be institutions that don't wish to be full voting members. So that's underway. Membership recruitment will be starting as soon as we get the postings translated and finalized. And there's a lot of transition planning going on with Compute Canada and with Canary, although it's, I think it's fair to say at this point, as I understand it, and I'm not personally very involved, as I understand it, it's largely in a discovery stage, if you will, to find out where things stand are and do some very, very initial consultations or discussions with people. The applicant board and the contribution agreement require a bunch of things for us to do. There's some reporting that has to be done to ISED by the end of January, a progress report on what's been done to date, and a corporate plan for the next year from April to March 2021. So that corporate plan will commit the incoming board. So again, we have to be very careful about it. We do have some funding under the current contribution agreement to engage in some potential pilot projects and activities. We'll be trying to launch that, I think, once the inaugural board is in place. And what we're looking to at this point is to set a meeting date in February where we'll go through a very careful dance. That is, the current applicant board will change its bylaws to allow the admission of new members. We will get everybody who wants to be a member in a room somewhere. The Applicant Board will admit those new members. The Applicant Board will present a slate of Inaugural Board members drawn from not only the candidates that the search firm brings forward, but any that are retained after having applied independently. So we will be encouraging anybody who's interested in being a board member to apply, and the details of that should be up very shortly today. So that will be a first general meeting in February, and then there will be a first annual general meeting sometime in fall 2020, assuming nothing else changes between now and then. So at this point, that was all of the prepared material I had. But I'm glad to answer any kinds of questions you have, and I can certainly go into more detail on any of the things I've said.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. That was a great overview. So, any questions out there? I had just one, Jay. I don't know if you can answer much of it, but what is the board, the inaugural board representation going to be? Do we, you know, who's going to be on it, really? Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm fighting off a cold here. So the the contribution agreement from ISED is fairly specific about what we have to do, put in place for that inaugural board. It must respect the normal federal government requirements for equity, diversity, and inclusion. We must use our best efforts to have at least 50% of the directors be women. We must ensure that 50% of the directors are excuse me, 50% of the directors are independent according to the definition from ISED. That definition is someone who has received no material benefit from NDRIO or the predecessor organizations over the last 3 years. So, for example, that would exclude anybody who on the board who is working at an institution that's received CFI funding in the last 3 years for digital research infrastructure. So half of the board members must be independent. The chair must be one of the independent members, and the rest we're hoping to. There will be a competency matrix that will be used to sort of slot people in and check off what kinds of skills we need. It's going to be a tall order because we need people who have all of the right digital research infrastructure skills, not only in ARC, but also in data management, in research software. We need some disciplinary representation. We need male and female. We need researchers and administrators and independent people and whatever. So that complexity is one of the reasons why we've engaged an executive search firm to help. And Outages as that firm and those kinds of firms in general have a lot of experience in setting up boards for new organizations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that I didn't quite realize there were so many restrictions on exactly who you can get from ISED. Yeah,
I think the way to put it is that the inaugural board will not be an old boys network.
Right. Sounds good to me. Yep. Cool. And the other one I was just it is March 2022, right? That we're thinking of the actual transition from Compute Canada to ARC.
Yes, there we have timelines. Yeah. Yes. So the current contribution agreement goes to March 2021. The funding agreement for Compute Canada goes to 2022. So in between now and then, the Inaugural Board and management will have to pull all of that transition planning together.
Yep. It's going to be an exciting time.
Indeed.
Oops. Right. Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah,
there's one.
Question, sorry, hi, this is Ahmad here. Hi, Jay.
Hi.
Got a question about the membership. Probably still in the works and probably in progress, but just a thought, pick your brain, see if there are, would there be like a list of benefits for, whether they're associates or full members with voting rights? Besides that, differences, are there like benefits that distinguishes between members versus associates or non-members at all? Like, what is the benefit of becoming?
So I guess there's two sides to that. Excuse me. On the one hand, ISED is very clear that no institution or researcher will be denied access to the infrastructure just because their institution is or is not a member. So access to services is completely guaranteed for all researchers. The information that has just been put out about the membership has a little bit about that in it. Basically, it says that only voting members will be able to nominate people to sit on the Researcher Council, which will be an important part moving forward, and that member institutions, whether they're associate or voting, will be expected to help form all of the working groups and committees that the Inaugural Board will be setting up. Again, that's an example of something where at this point the Applicant Board and management are not trying to define everything about how that will work going forward. So yeah, there's still a lot of unknowns, but the main benefits of membership are you get to have a voice in all of the proceedings in the same way as many of you people participate in a number of Compute Canada and other working groups. So that whole infrastructure, something similar will eventually be put in place. So I think those are the main benefits of membership, in addition, of course, to having access to the formal communications and records and things. I see there's a question in the chat.
Have you got it, Jay? Yeah.
Yeah, I said I did say astronomy groups as an example of what I call a disciplinary group that may wish to be involved. As we see things now, the only gateway to associate membership is approval by the board. So any organization that wishes to pay the $500 a year to have membership, subject to some minor vetting by the board, will presumably be allowed to become an associate member. Does that answer the question?
Sounds like it, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, not really. Why don't whoever that is? I just see DE. Why don't you turn your mic on and we'll do it with text rather than chat.
Can you get in there? No useful mic. Okay. Yeah. What was the problem then with Jay's answer? It didn't really give you complete information. So maybe. Right.
If you want to, let me put my phone number here. You can phone me after this call is over if you want to talk. Any of you, for that matter.
That sounds like a good idea. Thanks, Jay. Yeah. Because I think that this is an interesting question as to whether, the astronomers have an organization and whether that would be some. Yeah.
They're not the only ones. There are lots
and there are many other ones around. Yeah, CAP and the physics and the, yeah. But okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Good, because I think that might be an interesting conversation. All right, any other questions? Yeah, thanks a lot, Jay. It's great that you can take the time to talk to WestGrid folks here, and I suspect we'll continue to ask you to further town halls as things proceed, and we end up with the real board and have some idea what the plans are going to be for the whole transition.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to help out, and but unfortunately, I have to drop off of the call and get onto some of these posting things that I need to do today.
Okay.
But I'm also the person who monitors info at Engage DRI, among others, so that's the best channel to ask questions. But I certainly am willing to take phone calls this morning.
And certainly on the sort of more technical end and the planning, I'm a member of the Council of CTOs for Compute Canada, and we are in the middle of sort of setting the stage, trying to write documents which say exactly what we do now, and then think about how we might want to prepare ourselves for the migration in 2 and a bit years' time. So. Yeah,
will there be any changes in services that will be offered, or will things be the same as under Compute Canada? I think that this is now a personal opinion. I think that the Inaugural Board and management, on the one hand, has to be committed, or is committed to, by ISED, to continuity of services. So there will not be a sudden do or die where between Friday night and Monday morning everybody has to switch over to a whole bunch of new systems and start afresh. So there will be that kind of operational continuity, implying that the services won't necessarily or won't change dramatically and quickly. What the Inaugural Board and management will likely want to do is review those services as well as the data management services and the research software services. And I think everybody would like to see those evolve and improve in whatever way best serves the community. And that's a good example of something where the researcher council and the associate members and the members will presumably be involved in brainstorming and planning sessions for the evolution of the whole package of services.
Yeah, I think too that from the CTO's point of view, in 2 years' time, even our new systems will be getting a bit long in the tooth, and there will be the money to spend. And how we spend that, whether there'll be new systems or slowly upgrade old systems, all those kinds of things, I think are up for grabs. And at the moment, I don't think we have too much of an idea of where all that will go. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we will still run big clusters, and they will look pretty much like they look today. But a lot of details in there, especially how the cloud will go and those kind of things. Yeah.
I think as well, I should say, we also need to keep in mind that both the data management and research software files need attention, and probably more so than the ARC files. So the only reason that's
good point,
relevant, if you will, is that those of us who are working on this need to feel happy that more money is being spent on data management and research software, and not say, but this should be going to iron only.
Right. Okay, yeah, thanks, Jay, and yeah, thanks for all your effort in doing this kind of thing too. Okay.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Okay, I will try to share my screen again. Yeah, that was great. Okay, right, so we just had that update, and I've got a few bits and pieces to share from WestGrid and Compute Canada, but I think clearly quite a lot of us are beginning to focus on this whole transition plan for the new organization, and trying to see where we fit and how we work with ISED, and of course, we've got to wait for that inaugural board. I'm kind of assuming that sometime in the summer, the board will want to reach out to the research community in a big way, whether that's town halls like this or face-to-faces or something. But I think they'll really want to know what the research community thinks they're doing and where they're going to go. I think it was about 4 years ago that we last did a major planning exercise with researchers, and that was really quite a long time ago. Anyhow, WestGrid and Compute Canada. So down to a few nitty-gritty things. For WestGrid itself, Lindsay Sill, our CEO, has moved on to some different things. So she's left WestGrid, left a couple of weeks ago, and the WestGrid board is recruiting a CEO as we speak. I think they're kind of in the final stages, and they're hoping for a new CEO somewhere in January or February. So at the moment, the senior management team is kind of sharing around all the CEO responsibilities over Christmas. And I wanted to note too that we've got a new staff. Marie Burrell, who's from SFU. I put a few notes there, and she'll be working with Alex Razumov as a training assistant. She joined just a few weeks ago, and I was in fact at UVic at the winter school that just happened. So welcome, Marie, to WestGrid. And I've got a little note there that we usually do a user survey in the autumn, and I don't think we did one last year. And so we're going to do another one, but due to folks like Lindsay leaving and all these new organization things, we didn't quite get it done. So scheduled for January, and as usual, we really hope that everybody will respond to it and give us some ideas how we're doing. Yeah, so that was just a very quick update from WestGrid of a couple of the major things going on. Another one that's of course going along is RAC 2020. I'm involved in that at the Compute Canada level. I co-chair the RAC admin committee. We've got over 590 proposals. That's the latest number. I've got 593 or 2 or something. And I just note that there's the graph from the last RAC, 507 last year. So we're way up again. And my initial look at reading some of these is that, in fact, the ask per proposal has gone up too. So we're still doing that very rapid rise in the requests. And remember that last year we had some real issues with not having enough by a huge amount. The numbers are theirs, and I will talk briefly just now about that new funding that we got and what we're doing with it. Very quick graph. All the due dates for RAC are done. The RPP progress reports are, for those of you doing RPPs, January 30th, and we are still meeting in mid-February, where we have a 3-day meeting in Toronto and go through all the proposals and all the science reviews. The science reviews are happening right now, and the review committees all meet in January to score the proposals. So we're still working through that. The really good news was that out of that $500 million, we made a case for transition funding. I mentioned this at the last WestGrid Town Hall, and I announced that it would invest $50 million, and then matching on top of that. So that's great. That was over the summer, and the national sites have been busily doing their RFPs and trying to see what they can get. I said, this was $50 million for straight hardware infrastructure. They didn't want to go any further, any outside the basics, and fundamentally it was in response to those numbers that we've just seen from the RAC, where there are so few resources for the number of asks. And our case to ISED was that it does take us a year or so to actually go through a whole purchasing and installation process. So if they wanted to wait until 2022, we would be so skint for resources, it would be ridiculous. So we made a very strong case and had all the graphs and things, and they came back and said, yeah, absolutely. You can see some of the numbers there that I'll talk a bit more about Arbutus in a second, the cloud, some significant increases there. Cedar going up by 50%, about 30,000 new cores, and essentially doubling the number of GPUs with a ton more storage. Graham, another 6,000 cores, more GPUs, and the Graham stuff, they're smaller, but they were right on top of things, and they've already got most of their gear installed and are busily looking at beta testing and making sure that it's up and running. I'm not quite sure. I think that'll just be integrated into the existing one shortly in the new year. And Niagara going up a bit, 15,000 new cores, and Niagara will have some GPUs. That's, Niagara being our flat, large parallel system with 60,000 cores right now, and designed for big parallel jobs with high-speed interconnects and such. But one of the things it doesn't have is GPUs, and of course they're in demand all the time, and additional storage and such. So all this sounds good, but unfortunately the little note down the bottom that, oops, let's let that disappear for a minute. Yeah, we had one remaining legacy system in Calcul, Quebec, MP2, with 30,000 cores, and yeah, they were old cores, very old cores now, so nothing like as powerful as the new ones, but nevertheless, that'll be retired, so we're going to be down 30,000 cores as well. So we've added, in total, some significant more power than MP2 had, and especially with the new cores, and users will be transitioning over to that. But I think we're still going to be seriously short of resources for RAC 2020. It's still going to be a competitive environment. Depending on what we see, and it's hard to know because of the difference between the old MP2 cores and the new cores. I wouldn't be surprised if we're still around 60% or so of that we can actually satisfy of the CPU asks, and the GPU's just going through the roof. So I don't know if we'll get up to 50%, probably still less again, maybe significantly less. I have to say we haven't seen or collated all the details yet. That'll come later in March. Anyhow, so it gives you a good idea, but at least we got the 50 million. That is wonderful. And I mean, these are significant more capabilities. Feel free, by the way, to ask questions as we go along. Is there a question there in the chat? Lixon said, Cedar, or Lixon from, says it's actually 20 petabyte storage. Okay, my numbers might be a bit old. So Cedar might have, that should be 2, it's 20. Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Lixon. So that was great. I'll go into a little bit in operations just quickly here. So I think we mentioned last town hall that the WestGrid development team, as a contribution to Compute Canada, has created a new system status pages and running it. So that's up and running, and you can get. And I see. I didn't actually that now they've got it working through Twitter as well. So great. Have a look at the status pages there, and since this is completely designed and developed by us, you're welcome to make comments. You can send them to me or to info at Compute Canada. Info at WestGrid, and we'll pass them on to the development team and see if there's anything that should be changed or is not working. I usually do a quick review of issues and outages. This is short, which is nice because we've fixed up a lot of the issues that we've been having with essentially the shared file systems. So Graham running perfectly happily over the whole autumn. Cedar, a couple of rather minor details there, but then a major outage at the end of October where the file system was further completely reconfigured there. /home was migrated to new hardware, and so that's independent now. /scratch got whole new file servers and disk controllers and has seen a significant improvement in performance. I think since then we essentially haven't seen any of these big events where the system gets hammered completely and slows right down. Slurm was updated, and I think we're getting famous now finding undiscovered bugs. So yeah, updated to the latest version, and then discovered that that existing jobs got their memory ask all screwed up. Some jobs got terminated. Sorry about that. The Cedar team was great at trying to follow up and fix that. And there was also some issues with hardware arriving a bit late, so that took, I think, 3 days instead of 2. But anyhow, that was say a major upgrade to really improve file system performance, which has always been one of the big issues, and I think that's really really helped. Beluga, the Calcul Quebec general purpose machine, they were out for a little bit, and they are also having some of those little file system issues here and there. At the moment, nothing serious. And Niagara going strong. There was a scheduled maintenance and one little cooling system failure, which brought the system down. But otherwise, going great. Nice system run by Cynet. And Arbutus, I've got a few more notes about replacing the hardware, but back in September, we needed to implement IPv6. So anybody using IPv6 could use it. But that failed. Another unexpected bug found, and that one, they finally worked with the vendors to fix that, and that was out slightly in December 4th. And unfortunately, there's going to need one more reboot, and I think that just got announced. Was it yesterday, or day before, on January 8th? And they did also a major cloud update, updated all the software, all the OpenStack stuff, and added a firewall. Then some minor details with DNS. So actually, overall, this is pretty good. This is quite a lot less than some of the other town halls I've been giving. Just a couple of things, and I think finally, kind of really on top of a lot of the issues we've had, and the systems are running really pretty smoothly. Just a couple of notes from the Arbutus cloud, that the expansion equipment is arriving right now, 6,500 new physical cores about, and I think that'll be something like 12,000 virtual cores. And a big one is that new GPUs. And not only that, they will virtualize the GPU layer. So that's tough to do, and we will be seeing how the performance is, and one can get GPUs in the cloud. So we had, I think, 1 or 2 very just GPUs on some nodes just for test purposes. Also, rather interestingly, a parallel file system accessible to cloud instances. And the idea here is that projects can then share storage among their team members, plus a backup service aimed at that parallel file system. Now, neither the GPU nor the shared storage, I think, will be up by April. The team just thinks that they've got quite a lot of work to do. So it is not being allocated in RAC 2020 at the moment, but we'll get back to you on how to ask for those resources and what they really look like once the team has had a chance to put it all together. And we're always considering object store again, but that'll be for the future. So cool stuff on the cloud end of things. I have only one sort of best practices recommendation that I have noticed over the last couple of months. That there have been a number of requests for restores on Scratch. And remember, Scratch is not backed up in theory, and it is purged. And I copied there the details of purging. The purging policy is on the docs, Compute Canada. And of course, as noted there, you get an email if there are files that the system thinks are inactive and can be purged. So pay attention to those emails. I mean, once they're purged, they're gone. It's Scratch. In fact, there is some capability of getting them back again, but generally not. And of course, if you do copy things over from Scratch to project, and project being the permanent storage area, then remember, it's nice if you can get rid of the things in Scratch. couple of usage. I just wanted to look at just straight CPU usage briefly. Niagara there on the left-hand side, very consistently running at well over I think 97–98%. Just it's plugging away with these nice big jobs, just working away. Both Cedar and Graham, being general purpose machines, are a little more spotty in their usage and not doing quite so well. They've got a lot of jobs in there. I noted that I think we're doing better. The interesting numbers there on the bottom that since January, the actual allocated to running jobs was running around 76–77%. That's gone kind of up to 80% or so now, so that's good. But most of it is that reserved, and that's nodes that or cores that are reserved for an upcoming job, and so they're not doing much. So that's still the big issue on all of this end of things, is the scheduling. How do we fit in a very large number of dissimilar jobs into the one cluster? And I think you can, on the right-hand side, I just put the overall view of Cedar's CPU, and you can see back earlier this year, back in January, certainly we had issues. They were very spotty and generally having some troubles. And then the big outages back in July, when they really improved the file system, and now we can see much better usage, much more consistent usage across the way. So I think we're feeling pretty happy with the whole works. I still want to say we've got so many users and so many requests for it, but the system's full. So job wait times and such are still reasonably long, and if a job just doesn't fit, then some jobs can take a long time to get started. Feel free to call us in those kinds of cases, and we'll do our best to see what we can in the way of making sure the jobs get going. And other machines, Beluga and Graham, are similar-ish to this kind of approach. I didn't put them any details on. One thing, let's see, I got a few minutes. Cedar GPU is really, really spotty. Look at that. It's all over the place. Now, some of it, as you can see from, for instance, the blue at the bottom on the left-hand side from some of our big users, that's Dr. Benjo doing lots of artificial intelligence stuff. They start and they do a lot, and then they don't do some. So we're really interested, or at least I think really interested in this GPU utilization, and that's our really restricted resource. Only 20%, 1 in 5 asks last year. So trying to improve this usage so that we get the best efficiency as we can, I think, is really important. And I've been talking to NVIDIA about some of their monitoring tools, and we're kind of hoping we can have a go at that. So that's for the future. It's kind of a big job to figure out how we can monitor individual jobs that are running on these GPUs and see how they're doing. But we'll get to that. Okay, I'm going to stop there and just spend the last 5 minutes, I think. Alex, do you want to take over?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. So next slide, please. I'm going to start with the visualize this computation. As you know, every year for the past 4 years, we've been running this visualization computation in Compute Canada and WestGrid. And this year is no different. So actually, we did things somewhat differently this year. So the theme of this year's computation that ran from early October until the end of November was remote rendering. So we asked participants to visualize a large data set. We provided a computational fluid dynamics data set that was, we provided on all our clusters, so people didn't have to download anything. They could simply log into the cluster and start rendering there. And also we allowed participants to bring their own data set. So the only condition was that rendering has to be done in parallel. So that means that data set has to be sufficiently large that you cannot render it on a workstation or on your own laptop. And we had quite a lot of interest, so about 20 people expressed interest in participating in the computation, and we had quite a few submissions. And so the submissions, we require that you use an open source tool, and then that you share your workflow with us. And we are proud to announce the winners. So next slide, please. The first place went to Thierry Villeneuve, PhD student from Université Laval. So Thierry had his own simulation, and he was actually doing something very similar to our default dataset. So our default dataset was an airfoil for a wind turbine. And so in this case, in his simulation, he also had a wind turbine, but it was a moving blade, a single blade that was moving in a circle. And then he did a single visualization, but it's actually really spectacular, dramatic visually. So you can watch the movie. At the bottom of the slide, I have a link, and we put the 3 winning visualizations there. And you can watch the movie, and it's a volumetric rendering of vorticity, so the regions where vorticity is very high, so at the edges of the blade are red, and then the turbulence is slowly dissipating and taking more and more volume. And it's a very, very nice visualization. Next slide, please. The second place went to Yochai Miron, a postdoc in astronomy from University of Toronto. And what Yochai did was quite different. He did not use a ready visualization package. He actually explored the VTK-M and VTK-H libraries. So VTK is a standard library. It's a very, very heavily used library for computer graphics and visualization that's been around for almost 30 years now, since early 1990s. But VTK itself not serial. So even though packages like Paraview and Visit, they heavily use VTK, all VTK rendering is serial. So for the past 7 years or so, there was an attempt. It's an ongoing project, open source project called VTK-M, to re-implement VTK library in C++ for multi-core processors for both CPUs and multi-core GPUs. So what Yochai did, he actually played with VTK-M on Cedar cluster, and he also, so because VTK-M, it provides multi-core rendering, but not distributed memory rendering on a cluster. He also played with VTK-H. So VTK-H is kind of an additional layer on top of VTK-M that lets you share messages and do rendering in parallel on a cluster. And so he produced some nice visualizations, and some of them were simpler, some of them were more spectacular. So I actually really like his last visualization, which you see a screenshot here on the slide, which is also volumetric rendering of vorticity. And you can see the full movie on our website. Next slide, please. Finally, the third place went to a student in plasma physics, Joshua Ludwig from University of Alberta, so one of the WestGrid institutions. And he was running his own simulation. So that is plasma physics, so propagation of a strong laser pulse in plasma, and very spectacular rendering. So the simulation was done on Niagara cluster, and rendering was done on, I think, on Niagara as well. So Joshua wrote his own ray tracing package that was utilizing 160 cores. So that is on four nodes on, actually, sorry, it's on Gram, sorry. The slide says Gram. Yeah, so it was utilizing multiple nodes for rendering on Gram cluster. And the result is quite spectacular visualization, which is really high resolution, and you can watch it on our website as well. Next slide, please. So on to our training, a quick recap of the training we did in 2019. We had 2 big events, 2 summer schools. One is at the University of Calgary, and the other one is at UBC in May and June, respectively. Our summer schools, they spend 4 days, and they have multiple streams running in parallel. So that means that we can actually offer a lot of courses. So in Calgary, we had 23 either half-day or full-day courses, and UBC 15 courses. So on various topics from introductory research computing, data processing, data mining, HPC, parallel programming, and machine learning in Calgary. So lots of different topics covered. And we had a few small events. So by small event, I still mean a multi-day event. So it's a 4-day event that we normally teach, which is basically a single stream, but also a variety of courses. And we did that in Saskatchewan, at SFU, and actually just last week at UBIC Winter School. And then also want to mention that University of Alberta is also doing their regular research computing boot camps that are happening once every few months. So winter, spring, summer, and fall semesters. And so we did a lot of training in 2019, and we plan on doing the same in 2020. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we already compiled a list of in-person and online events that we are planning to offer. And you can watch this this schedule on the website that is shown on this slide. So this schedule is always up to date, and you can bookmark it. So you'll have the links for individual events. You will have links to the registration pages, and then for previous events like webinars, the links will be replaced by links to the actual slides and the YouTube recordings. So we already have a list of 9 confirmed webinar presentations for winter and spring, and then we'll have 2 big summer schools, so UBC and University of Manitoba. So the dates for the summer schools, so sometime in May and June, are going to be announced sometime in January. And then also want to mention that we also teach the Digital Humanities Summer Institute in Victoria, and we're going to be offering a number of courses. I want to mention 3D visualization and programming in Python for digital humanists. And also, as Patrick mentioned, we have a new trainer, Marie-Ellen Bill, and she's developing a couple of new courses, so machine learning with TensorFlow in Python, and also programming with Julia language and machine learning in Julia. And I'll be developing a new course on web-based three-dimensional scientific visualization in your browser. And these courses will be ready for our summer schools. So please make sure that if you can, please attend our summer schools, because it will have a lot of new material. And then finally, I want to mention that if you have any requests for any topics or any workshops, please send me an email, alex.razumov@westgrid.ca. And we're particularly interested in topics, new topics. So if you think that there's something that you really want us to teach, we'll be happy to take a look at it. And so get in touch with us. And also, if you want a workshop at your place, so a 4-day event, a 1-day event, please just shoot me an email, and we'll be happy to schedule it. And my final slide is on the training archive. As you know, we had this online page for the past couple of years where we try to gather all our training materials, and we keep updating it all the time. And it's organized both chronologically. So if you go to events and click on a given semester, they will have all webinars and in-person events, and you can actually click on individual event and see materials from that event. And also we have submenus for domains and tools. So by tools, I mean things like visualization, cloud computing, containers, etc., etc. And so we try to organize these, in reasonable and easy to find way. So that's all from me, and now back to Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. That's great. Yeah, let me see. Depending on how much time there was going to be, I had some stuff about our cloud investigations. You can read that in the presentation, because we're kind of reaching the end of this session. Well, there were questions. Nope, I thought we had a general question, but info@westgrid.ca, and yeah, so I think we're kind of done for this year. Thanks for attending. I hope everybody has a good Christmas. Doesn't submit too many jobs over Christmas, and otherwise, thanks everybody, and feel free to get in touch with us.